What's good, everybody? Looks like we're live for another Tuesday night live stream. I know I've been jumping back and forth. Tuesday nights aren't great for me, but I've been trying to maintain some consistency. And so some days they'll be on Tuesdays, some days they'll be on Wednesdays. Since we got the holidays coming up, I don't necessarily want to be here tomorrow doing this. I may hop on TikTok and kind of do that live stream. Um, but it is what it is. So on tonight's episode. I got a couple of things. We're going to do a little bit of Ask a Dad stuff. I'm going to follow up to the conversation I had about power scaling a marble, just because I had to do a little bit more digging. Um, got some more Ask a Dad kind of stuff. Um, and then I want to talk about a trope that I've seen kind of played out. I happen to be just watching regular television and I saw the trope played out. And since it was regarding Black characters, I wanted to kind of touch base on it and the conservative, Black conservative grift movement, and that's what's going on. So first things first, why don't we start with some Ask a Dad questions? Again, y'all, I really I want y'all to jump in here. If you see this, leave a comment or shoot me an inbox if you got something you want me to answer. But the concept of this is you're getting a little bit more accomplished, a little bit more seasoned Black male who grew up as a nerd. I came up as a nerd in the 90s where the nerd stuff wasn't cool back then. And so I feel like I do have a pretty unique perspective on some stuff. I've accomplished a few things. I deal with neurodivergence, ADHD, possible autism. I don't know. I'm scared to go get tested on that aspect of it, but definitely ADHD diagnosis that I've had since I was a little kid, but then I got re-diagnosed as an adult. And so I have a unique perspective on some things, and I would like to share my perspective on some stuff. And so I'm here to field any questions you have about parenting or careers, or even stuff you're dealing with interpersonally. I'm not a licensed therapist. I was on that path. I'm not on that path anymore, but I'll do my best to just frame it the way I see it. If you need a little bit more instruction or help with it, there are therapists out there. I have to get one to plug the show so I can give them a recommendation, because I don't know any off the top of my head. All right. So first things first, I wanted to open up with the Ask a Dad segment. And I feel like it's important because when I was growing up, even when I say growing up, I don't consider you being a full adult until you're like 24 to 27 years old. And by then I had still, like, by the time I was 22, 23 years old, I had pretty much had a career established, in a career path and whatnot. But there's a lot of things that I wish I had somebody who was a little bit closer to my age that I could ask, because my mom was kind of nearing retirement. The other grown-ups that I knew were kind of nearing retirement, and they didn't quite understand the job market as it pertained to that elder millennial, baby Gen X, exennial kind of thing. It's different for that. And plus, the other side, I was a Black male in a field that was dominated by white women, and that adds another wrinkle to it. So this is what Ask a Dad is. And it's really just hopping in here and answering some questions that I wish people would have had answers for me. Okay. Why do I always feel like I'm lagging behind everyone else my age? So I have a unique perspective on this. I started school early. I skipped kindergarten, I think. And so I'm anywhere between 6 months to 18 months younger than everybody else I graduated with. And so I was already lagging behind everybody my age. And then I throw in the ADHD, which my maturity level, even then, hindsight being 2020, my maturity level, I was about 2 years behind everybody in my grade level. I was still when I was in like seventh grade, I was still playing with action figures and stuff. And that was my concerns. That's what I was having fun with. And so I I didn't hit a lot of those same signposts of adolescence, some of those same signposts of adolescence that, around the same time my peers did. And so by the time I was in ninth grade, my mentality was more like a seventh grader. Okay. That being said, I go back to this, and I'm going to mention this. You have to step a little bit away from the social media world, because on social media world, What happens in social media world is you're going to see everybody's highlights. You're going to see that trip that they took to Bali. You're going to see um, the exotic cars they drive and all this other stuff. You're going to see these fabulous hotels that they stay in on these never-ending vacations. What you don't necessarily see when we're looking at this stuff is you're not necessarily seeing that, yeah, they took that trip, but their car is about to get repoed. And so a lot of times when you watch what's happening on social media and you're comparing your life through the frame and the lens of social media, you're getting a warped sense of what actually is. You may be a lot better off than a lot of people that you know or interact with on a daily basis, but you'll never know that because social media gives you a stage to present the version of you that you want people to see, as opposed to the version that actually exists. So understand that you're lagging behind. You may feel behind everybody else, but everybody else feels that same way. And so understand that that's what social media does. You are comparing your day-to-day existence to somebody else's highlights, and that's never going to work. Um, and sometimes people have different home conditions. Sometimes they live in different timelines. Sometimes you may be more advanced than somebody that had a bigger head start than you. And so at some time, I think the maybe the takeaway is comparison is the thief of joy. That's the thing that will rob you of enjoyment of a lot of accomplishments is when you start comparing yourself to other people. Okay. And so there's all kinds of different things that you've encountered along the way that led you to where you currently are. Um, you could be coming from poverty. You could be dealing with some trauma. You could have nothing going on and none of that stuff going on, but you encountered some snag in college. You changed careers. There's plenty of things that go on, or sometimes you've just come along a little bit later. Um, Comparing yourself is a good way to keep yourself in the same place. Okay, understand that you are one of one. Okay, there's no such thing as being on schedule. Okay, you're on the track that makes sense for you. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Um, let's see. Why do my mistakes feel like life sentences? Um, a lot of times it comes with dwelling too much on the mistake, and I'm a walking example of this again. Um, you know, the only person like this is a one man podcast, and I don't always mean to center myself, but this is the only frame of reference I have. Um, you have to evaluate how you make mistakes, right? And I think what happens is we make a mistake and we dwell on the mistake, but we don't dwell enough on the lesson that is contained within that mistake. I think reframing the mistake and saying, okay, what can I learn from this was a good way to shorten that feeling like I screwed up. So I will focus more on the lesson that was contained within the mistake. What did you learn? What can you apply? What can you do differently? Okay. It's just getting reps. It's just getting reps. That's all it is. And a lot of times, especially depending on where you are in the socioeconomic strata, some mistakes are more detrimental to other than others. I know kids I went to high school and college with. Um, they came from white households and they may have got arrested when they were younger, but that didn't color their entire existence. Meanwhile, I know if I would have got arrested at a young age and had a criminal record, that would absolutely obliterated my career track. And so you can't compare that kind of stuff. All right. Um, Learn the lesson that's contained in the mistake, and it's going to make the mistake not feel as big. Okay, this thing didn't go right. What did I learn from this thing? Okay. So the mistake doesn't have to feel like a life sentence. Just learn the lesson that you can apply to your life. Okay. How do I stop losing friends who say I'm changing? Ooh. All right. So one thing my wife, this is a phrase that she says. People are with you for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And sometimes you may be in a different season than the friend you're with. Okay. You growing sometimes creates friction. Sometimes the friends that you have, they only want you to be in one place, and they're not ready to see you evolve to another frame. Um, I was pretty fortunate where I was in high school. I had friends that kind of knew that I was on a little bit different track. the crew I was rhyming with and stuff, they would tell me straight up, like, A, you're doing different things. You don't need to go here with us. You're on a different path. They were kind of proud that I was in college and I was doing my thing. And so that was a point of pride for them. And so they were really glad to see me grow along that track. It wasn't based on keeping me in the same box. But sometimes, and this is friends and family sometimes people have a snapshot of who you were, who they remember you as, and they want to always keep you in that box. And when you grow past that box, it makes them feel uncomfortable. And their way of feeling uncomfortable is to project it upon you. All right. That's the second part of it. But understand, is this friend with you for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? Like my wife says, and if it's only a reason, to figure out what the reason is and then move on. If it's a season, figure out what season you are in life, make sure your seasons align. But if your seasons are mismatched, you can move on. If they're really friends with you, they'll be back when you cycle back around. Okay. And if it's lifetime, then you don't have to worry about it. They're there to grow along with you and cheer you on. Okay. But if somebody's saying you're changing, and it's not like you picked up a drug habit and now you are changing into a person that they don't recognize or they don't align with. I'm talking about you're growing, and you've taken on different interests, or you're expanding your horizons. If they're trying to keep you in the same box, they may not be that lifetime friend. That might be the seasonal friend. Okay. But you're going to keep evolving anyway. Don't put a limit on your growth because of outside factors. Okay. Old friends may not like the new version of you, and that's fine. Sometimes they come around. Sometimes they haven't started on their growth journey yet. And so they don't quite necessarily know how to take you. And your growth journey makes them feel self-conscious about the growth journey they're skipping out on. So you never know why somebody can disconnect with you, but you got to focus on your own growth. Okay. What do I do if I feel disconnected from my blackness? Okay. So again, perception comes from Black Nerd in 90s. The only nerds that we saw on television were Stephen Urkel. And there wasn't exactly a space for Black nerds back then. I'm really glad we live in the era we do now, where there's actually spaces for us to exist and talk about our life experiences and share with one another. But the feeling disconnected from blackness, what is blackness? What is your blackness? When I confront, I was, the little hip. If you follow me on TikTok, you'll see it. I was a little nerdy Black kid. You'll see my picture. I was nerdy, but at the same time, I was also a huge hip hop head. And so you would look at me and not assume that I was into EPMD and NWA and all this other stuff, but I was. And so that was my tether. That was the thing I connected to, the Black culture that I connected to. But I was sitting there watching Mystery Science Theater and trying to talk about Mystery Science Theater with some of my peers and cousins, and they was like, nah. I think we have to identify what is your blackness. It's not a checklist. Okay. And it's not a trope. I think one of the things is, I think we have to prioritize building community with Black folks that are like us. And so, and I'm going to go into the Black conservative grifter thing, but that's why a lot of Black conservatives mess with a lot of Black conservatives. Like they interact with one another because that's the pool that they feel comfortable in, and that's fine. I think you just got to find your group of folk, your group of Black folks that are on the same wavelength as you are. And it may not be a huge amount of them. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. Our population of Black folks here is about 12%. And so you find the like-minded Black people that align with you and rock with them heavy. But I don't think that there is like this barometer of Blackness. I think what happens is a lot of times you get into circles and they traffic in anti-Blackness. And in order to fit in, people end up, kids especially, I've seen it, Black kids, I've seen it where it's kind of the fly in the milk situation where they start trafficking in anti-Blackness just to fit in within the peer group that they're in. And so I would urge you not to do that side of it. But sometimes you roll dolo. You are a crew of one. I tell people all the time, I was really, really lonely in high school up until about 10th grade when I stopped trying to fit in. And once I stopped trying to fit in, that's where I found my people. Okay. But feeling disconnected from it, I would say, what part of Blackness are you feeling disconnected from? Because you don't have to love everything that a Black person is involved in. Um, you don't have to. You don't have to connect with everything. You don't have to feel resonance with everything a Black person is involved in. Perfect example. I'm not huge into the Greek life, like Black Greeks. I'm not into the fraternity stuff. And so that's a area of Black culture that I am on the outside of looking in. And I'm fine with that. I think you got to kind of have to identify what you are characterizing as Blackness, if that makes sense. Okay. Is it normal to feel angry for no reason? Absolutely. Now, if you feel like this anger is preventing you, or where it's a constant thing where you're always angry, this is probably a time to actually seek some professional outside person to sit down and talk to. But as you're growing and stuff, you're going to encounter emotions that you can't quite conceptualize. It's not necessarily just because you're feeling an emotion doesn't mean you have to act out that emotion. Okay. You can feel angry without yelling or hurting things or smashing stuff. You can experience the emotion without being completely subservient to it. But yeah, it is fine. Sometimes you do feel sad for no reason. Sometimes you feel angry for some reason, no reason. It can be anything to do with the mix of chemicals in your brain, the hormones that are firing off, something environmental you're not aware of, some undigested bit of mental trauma that you're processing. And so there's a lot of different things that can cause that. Um, I would say if your anger is always there, if you're always angry and it's affecting your life, you're affecting your ability to make friends, affecting ability to hold down any kind of job or do your schoolwork, this is where you need to ask for help. Okay. Because there's some undigested thing that you're processing that you may not be able to unpack on your own. You need to sit down and talk to somebody. Okay. But that's what it is. Um, it's perfectly fine to not know why you're angry. But when it consumes your life, that's when you need to go and find some outside help. Okay. The thing you don't want to do, and this comes from some behavioral stuff. When you are angry, there's this thing, there's a myth of catharsis where you have to get the anger out. You have to take your anger out on something. What that does is it puts you in a heightened emotional state, and catharsis feels good. And so what that trains your brain to do is seek out moments where you can have catharsis. And so it will ratchet up your anger so that you can have moments of catharsis to release. So I encourage you, if you're feeling angry, find ways to calm yourself down, find somebody to talk to if you feel like it's impacting your life, or sometimes just sit in the emotion and kind of figure out why you feel this way. But what I encourage you not to do is fall into this trap of, I have my anger and I have to find this outlet to unleash my anger on. You can find an outlet, but it's not unleashing it. It's finding a way to calm yourself down and calm your state of arousal down. It's one of the reasons why when kids were angry in the facilities I ran, we didn't let them go hit the heavy bag. We didn't let them go do aggressive stuff when they're angry. We'd say, you can go hit the heavy bag after you calm down, because all that does is create a state of arousal. And it doesn't necessarily calm them down. It just makes them a little bit more agitated. And so, the hell? And so that's what I'm saying. And so I would unpack why you're angry. If you need to talk to somebody, if it's impacting your life and your ability to interact with other people, or to even fully embrace who you are and love yourself, this is where you need to sit down and talk to somebody if you feel like you're always angry. But what I would avoid is going out and finding ways to release the anger, because it's never a productive way. Calm down first and then do the things that bring you joy. Don't use that as always your outlet. That makes sense, because all that does is set you up to continue to be more angry, because catharsis feels good. All right. Um, how do I deal with racist teachers, coaches without getting labeled? This is a tightrope, man. There's no clean answer to this. You need to document everything. Find find other authority figures that you trust and document everything. And you choose your battles wisely. You go in and say, is this a battle I'm equipped to win here? Or will this cost me more by planting my flag and putting 10 toes down on this thing? Sometimes some things are worth 10 toes down on. Other times it's choosing the battle and saying, is this the front that I'm going to win on? Is this the front that's going to be successful? Or is this only going to harm me and only me? But when you're dealing with that racist boss, you're dealing with that racist coach, or you're dealing with that racist teacher, you need to document everything, every interaction. You need to be writing it down. Depending on the laws of your state, if you're allowed to record, if it's just a single party consent state, then you may want to record and document every single interaction so that you can protect yourself in case there's retaliation. And learn the phrase, I feel like I'm being retaliated against. Learn that phrase. If it comes down to it, learn the phrase, I feel like I'm being retaliated against. It's kind of like the search and seizure stuff. And I'm not here to give legal advice. I'm not here to do that. But learn the phrase, I feel like I'm being retaliated against. Because saying that changes the game from an HR perspective. It changes the game from a legal perspective and stuff like that. And if you document, I told them I felt like I was being retaliated against, now you have you've kind of planted a flag to actually build a case upon. But choose your battles wisely, document everything. Understand that you're not going to win. Sometimes you're not going to win the battle on their battlefront, and you have to pick and choose what battle you're going to fight and when you're going to fight it. Okay, so now we're moving up to the 35 and up, because that was more for teenagers. Okay, how do I chase money without losing my sanity? That's a hard time. That's a hard thing to say in a recession. And yes, we're going to be in a recession. I don't care how the economic indicators are there. And even if we're not in a recession where the economy shrinks for 2 consecutive quarters, we're feeling it in our pocketbooks and at the pumps and all that other stuff. So how do I chase money without losing my sanity? I think you have to find the chase that makes sense to you, where you don't feel like you're giving away pieces of yourself. Okay. Don't chase flexes. You want to chase the freedom. You want to chase things that are going to give you the freedom to make decisions and make permanent changes in your life. Don't chase the materialistic things that you can just throw in somebody's face. Chase the things that actually buy you leverage so that you can create the life that you want. Okay. Set boundaries for the people that you love and around you. Sometimes you're going to have to let somebody down and say, hey, things are a little bit tight. I may not have the money for this. Prepare them for that. Okay. And don't fall into the hustle culture thing. The entire Lamborghini and big wads of cash thing that, what's his bucket? Was it Ty Lopez was running down, that that ate the brains of a lot of folks that are my age and a little bit younger. That was bullshit. And it was leased Lamborghinis and fake wads of money. Okay. That was propaganda so that he can get more people to watch his content. Pursue the things that make you happy, the things that you find valuable. And sometimes it is putting the head down. Like I did in my shelter work, I was doing, 60 hours a week. And I wasn't getting paid overtime. It was just so that I could operate my shelter the way I needed to, and make sure everything worked, and I could have my performance review reflect that. But I think it's figuring out the lever that's going to give you the freedom that you need, and chase that, and chase the money to obtain that freedom. Okay. How am I burnt out this early? It's never too early to get burnt out, y'all. Anything can burn you out. But if you consume too much of this online propaganda, productivity, the cult of productivity, if you consume too much of that, if you consume too much of this rise and grind kind of stuff, you're on the way to burn out really, really quick. Okay. And if you're neurodivergent, you may be running into that ADHD depression overlap, and that can feel a lot like burnout. Okay. But rest is required, it's not earned. Okay. um the entire concept of earn your leisure, that sounds cute and everything, and there's going to be seasons where you absolutely do the John Henry thing, and you put your head down and you grind and grind and grind, past the point of fatigue and burnout. You want to make those few and far between, especially for Black folks. The John Henryism thing is a very real thing, where you feel like you have to be the savior of your entire household. And the idea is John Henry worked himself to death. There was no reward. He worked himself to death. And I know a lot of Black folks that are my age that are in that John Henry kind of place, because society kind of forces you to. And so there are going to be seasons where you are getting your John Henry on. I hope talk to my homegirl Tasneem about this. There's seasons where you're getting your John Henry on. You just got to be aware and cognizant of those seasons and provide yourself with enough rest between those seasons. But burnout is a natural thing, and you're never too young, or you're never too young to burn out on something, especially when it's something that is emotionally draining. It's really easy to get burnt out on it. All right. Shoot, I got a lot of questions here, and so I'm kind of picking through. How do I know when it's time to change careers? Okay, so I'm speaking. This is another one I'm speaking from experience. By the time I was 36 years old, I achieved everything that I had set out to do in my career. Everything that I had set up to do in my career. I had gone from the front lines of working direct care all the way up to a director's chair, where I had anywhere between 35 and 50 staff reporting to me. And I was the director of my own program. And by the time I got to that seat where I thought I wanted to be, the thing I felt most after the initial rush of joy of I've accomplished this thing was emptiness. Because I reflected on all the hours that I had given up with my wife and kids to get that. And how I knew some of these state place kids better than I knew my own kids, I felt like. And so I think for me, it was past the point of, because I used to tell my staff all the time, especially doing case management, residential care, human services, that family support, that enclave of stuff, that little bubble of stuff. I tell my staff, when you get burned out, it's time to leave this field, because the decisions that you make while you're burnt out impact these families forever. And I needed to take my own advice, because I had reached that critical level of burnout. And I was hovering around it. And then I lost my mom. My mom passed. And whatever empathy that was in me to work with staff and work with families and stuff drained out of me. And I knew it was time to quit. I knew it was time to leave. I think when your career feels like you're shackled to it, you might want to start looking at the exit. And I have an entire other channel where I talk about this stuff, and talk about how if somebody hires you to do a job, if you've been hired to do a job, you have a skill set that you can go make money with. You just got to figure out how to apply that, whether it's working for somebody else, working in a different field, or opening up your own thing. And business ownership ain't for everybody, but you can always take the skills that you have, treat it like a business, and go trade it in for a better job in a career field that's different. But when you feel like this thing is suffocating you, that's when it's time to leave. Okay. I used to feel, I knew it was time for me to get out of the residential care human services field, because I was having panic attacks every single day driving into work. And part of it was I had to drive by the hospital where I lost my mom on a daily basis. And I had to step away from it. Okay. So I'm gonna save some of these questions for next. week. But one thing I do want to pull up here, especially if whoever's watching here, one of the things that's interesting, because I did the question about feeling disconnected, and isolation. A lot of questions about isolation and not feeling like you're in sync with everybody else that's around you. I'm gonna show you this, and I want to show y'all some of the effects of what bullying can actually do. So I'm gonna put up one of my senior pictures here. All right, you see this kid here. At the time, I was about 16. I was a senior, and I was 16 years old. Like I was a few weeks off from my 17th birthday. Um, this young man in this picture, I thought I was one of the ugliest kids in my high school. Thought I was fat. Thought nobody liked me. Um, I had a lot of baggage that I was carrying around from the experiences I had being pretty much spending a good chunk of my younger days on the outside. And when I finally adapted and figured out who I wanted to be, um, I had my group of friends, but I felt like I was still walking alone to a lot of degrees, and I still carried a lot of the bullshit that impacted me from the time I was in eighth grade in my brain. I had a really kind of a lower opinion of myself, even though I had got comfortable in my own skin. I did have a pretty low opinion of myself. And so, and if you look at this picture, it's not, you know, you look at this picture, you wouldn't see that. You would think that this is like one, I would think that you would think that it's a normal kid. You never quite know what somebody's enduring or what somebody's going through, what somebody's in their headspace. So whenever you see somebody that you feel like you're envious of or you want their life, understand you may want their life, but you may not want their headspace. You may not want to live in their brain, because in this brain here, I was struggling with a lot of different things and not feeling like I was like I had my crew and I had the dudes I hung out with and whatnot, and they accepted me for who I was. But especially when it came to talking to girls and stuff like that, man, I was like, I may have been a senior in this picture, but I was 10th grade emotionally. And so I still didn't quite necessarily know how to approach girls or talk to them or do any of the relational things that a lot of my peers were doing. And I was really struggling with that aspect of it. I didn't quite know how to engage on that front. And I beat myself up a lot for it. So again, this is me when I was 16 years old, my senior pictures. Um, you may look at it and you may not see anything up with that. I got another senior picture here that I can pull up. Um, you may not see anything too crazy or egregious or where you're like, dang, what was he on? Like, why is he beating himself up? But I did. I was struggling. Um, and that's okay. It really is. It's an okay thing. Um, Let me see. I'm gonna download this one here because I'll show you one more. And even now, I think about it, my opinion on myself back then was crazy, right? Like it was, I don't understand. I just had a really bad opinion. Like, and it came from, it was residual effects of eighth grade and being bullied and stuff. This is me. This is another senior picture. I'm the same age, just at a different location. There was a lot going on in that head right there. And like I said, I had an opinion of myself that wasn't necessarily reflective of my value or my worth or who I was at the time. And so I struggled a lot with that stuff. And it's okay. You end up growing out of that stuff. But, I didn't think I could get girls. I didn't think that I was an attractive kid. I didn't think that I had anything going on. But at the time, um, you know, I, I, I was trying to rhyme. I was trying to be a rapper. Had some success at that end. Um, I was working at, uh, I was interning in the engineering department of a local corporation of Union Pacific. I was in the engineering department, and so I'd been doing that since I was like 14 or 15 years old. And my jobs were anything from reprogramming and readjusting the railroad maps and updating the railroad maps on the computer to filing stuff. Um, but it was an intensive job, and I was doing it at 15 years old. You know, at that age, by that time, I was 2 years removed from flying a plane. At that time, I was 3 years removed from being the captain of the mission when my mom paid for me to go to space camp. Like I had a lot going on. I did not see it as that. I felt like the biggest loser in the world. And so that's just what it is. You never know what somebody else is enduring. And so just be aware of that, and be kind to people. Maybe that's the takeaway from it. I just felt like throwing that in there. Cool. All right. Now that we're all thoroughly depressed, let's talk about grifters. No, let's talk about, I'll come back to grifters. I want to talk about this thing. And I was watching, what was it? 911 Nashville. Now, I don't ever intentionally watch 911 Nashville. It just happened to come on the TV screen. And so me and my wife are just sitting there watching this thing. And I noticed something. There's a young Black lady on there. And she is, I think, the only Black person in the main cast. Maybe not. I think one of the heads of the Chiefs, one of the top ends of the person that plays the boss is Black. But she's a Black in isolation. She's surrounded by all these white folks. And I've noticed that a lot of shows where they don't have, where it's set and they have like one or two Black folks, we never, and I've seen it in comic books too. While you get a chance to see white folks go to church or go hang out with their families or go do other things and be with people that aren't part of their work life, we don't get a chance to see that with Black folks in these shows. And it feels like a trope where it's just like this isolated Black person in this place surrounded by white folks. But when you look at them, their line ain't jacked up. Her hair is laid right. So at somewhere she's walked into a Black beauty salon. This is in Nashville. I know there are Black folks in Nashville, bro. But she's gone to a Black beauty salon. She doesn't have any Black friends to hang out with or anything. And so you never see her life really, like it's just a snapshot because they may have shown all this stuff, but you never see her life outside of that. Whereas you see all the other characters, you see what their lives are like outside of that work environment. You never see the Black character go interact with any Black community. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times when Black people live in places where they're kind of isolated, it's an isolated community, we tend to find each other. We tend to find each other, especially when it comes to our healthcare or our beauty stuff and our beauty regimens. You know, we'll find where the Black barber is, or at least at the very least, we'll ask around, say, where do all the Black people go to get their hair cut? Because there are white barbers that know how to cut Black folks' hair, right? But we will ask for that kind of stuff. There are signifiers that when you see a Black person in one of these environments, you know, we still go to a Black church, you know, if we can. And so it's just interesting. It's an interesting little thing to me when I watch these shows and they have this Black person just in isolation, surrounded entirely by white folks, maybe some brown folks sprinkled in there, but there's no community. There's no cultural touch points. You know, shape up. There's no barbershop around. Her hair is laid. Her hair looks good. She just got her hair done. She didn't go to a Black beautician or anything. And Black folks know what I'm talking about with this stuff because residential care, we used to have to fight to take our kids to Black barbershops because they would go to these white barbershops and absolutely get butchered until we found a white barber that learned at a Black barber school. And that's where we ended up taking our kids most of the time. Okay. So the character's written as kind of this diversity figure, but not necessarily as an entire human being. And it feels off because there's no context, there's no nuance or anything. Did this Black person just emerge from another dimension, or do they have family? Do they have brother or sister? If they moved here, that's cool. Did they identify a community? Because a lot of times when Black folks move from one city to another, we find the Black church, we find where the Black barbers are, we find where the other Black people are that are kind of in our age cohort. Where do they hang out? What bar, what clubs do they go to and stuff like that? Where do the Black folks hang out here? What do y'all do around here? Okay. And so you find the identity erased, and it's writers. A lot of times it was reflective of the writing rooms because they don't necessarily know how black people interact in environments where we are completely a complete and total minority. Okay. And so one of the concerns I have, and it's a larger point, and some of y'all are going to say, "Hey, you're reaching and stuff like that," but I do feel like there's an element of it where it's kind of instructing us that you have to leave cultural touch points and black cultural touch points behind in order to achieve success. Okay. And it reinforces this proximity to whiteness as a default. Like I said, a lot of black folks, that's where the entire code switching thing comes from and stuff like that. Sometimes we have to go and emerge in white environments, but then we always come back to where we're comfortable and where we identify with people. I used to have to go to I used to have to work at one of the whitest places in the world. But I always went to, I'll go back and find my black barber. um, you know, they would invite me out to the bar, and I knew that bar wasn't made for me, so I had to go find bars where the black folks went, and all the black employees went somewhere else. They didn't go to the bar that all the white people went to. From a musical standpoint, from a crowd standpoint, it didn't align with our interests, and so that's all I'm saying, y'all. Okay, I think in order to make this a little bit better, and I've talked about this with comic books. When you look at Marvel, there is no real black community within Marvel comics unless there's a black writer writing it or a person of color writing it, where they're able to, like, if you have Kamala Khan, you're able to build a community around her that feels authentic because the person that's writing has some understanding or some depth of experience. Okay. And so that's what I'm saying, y'all. I feel like as these writer rooms get more diverse, they're going to have to, as we start becoming a more multicolored society where it's not just white as the default for everybody's existence. Even the TV shows are going to have to start reflecting, hey, this black person just doesn't exist in isolation as a bubble where they are just in here with all these white folks and they don't have a barber they go to. They don't have a church they go to. It is what it is. And I know a lot of people are going to see this, especially if you're on the outside. And this is why I'm not necessarily making this about y'all, but if you're on the outside, you just need to understand that it's something you don't understand. You may not have the breadth or depth of experience to understand what I'm talking about. Those that do. And if you want to learn more, then you need to ask your black friends and kind of talk about it. Like, if you see it on the show, hey, call it out for what it is. Where are the other black folks? Like I said, we tend to, if we move into a new place, we tend to find out where other black folks are. A lot of us do. It's not all of us, but a lot of us do. We tend to try to build community with other black folks. Okay. Hell, I knew growing up in the hood, the white folks that grew up in the hood, they had other white folks that they hung out with that were in the hood. Like, it wasn't, there were still some cultural touch points that you had, so it is what it is. But yeah, show black spaces and white spaces. And I think maybe that's the crux. Maybe that's the entire crux of what I'm saying. Show both spaces, show that they can exist in multiple environments, show how, a lot of times black folks in our community, there are certain things that are understood that don't necessarily have to be said. But when you cross over and cross those lines, there are things that need to be said, or things that black people just kind of look at each other and nod. Okay. Realistic cultural code switching and stuff like that. Okay. That's all I'm asking for. It was just kind of a jarring thing. And it's something I've seen enough where it's, I don't know if I want to go on TV tropes and write a trope about it. There may be one that already exists, but the black person that just exists out of nowhere is one of the tropes that I wish would go away. And I'm going to see only black person in town TV tropes. Okay, I've seen token minority. Same race means related, but not too black. The black index, monochrome casting. And so I've seen it, the token minority couple. I don't know if there's necessarily the trope where the black person comes into town and they they just are just by themselves, off by themselves, doing their own thing, like where they don't interact with any other black people. They don't go to any black barbers. Where do you get beauty supplies? Where do you get hair stuff? Like stuff that questions that need to be answered. All right, let's move on. I will build on this one a little bit later on. I'm gonna touch base on this because I don't want to spend too much time on these people. But I did notice as I was building the outline for the show, I listened to a brother who went on with he went on a show with the Hodgkin twins or whatever, the two buff sellouts that are like conservative grifters and super anti-black and everything. He went on there and almost got into a fight with them because they allowed one of their guests to hit him with the hard R, and they jumped up and tried to defend the guest. And I think did I call them the Hodgkin twins? I don't know, the Hodge twins. I think that's what they are. They occupy a specific space in my mind, and I could be wrong about them. I don't know these people, and I try to avoid their content whenever possible. But when on the times where I'm actually doing research for the show, I do have to ingest some of it. I would say that I will not say that black conservatives don't exist. I would never say that because I know black conservatives. I've interacted with black conservatives, but the ones that are online, that is not really representative of a large segment of black contemporary political thought or alignment. They represent a fringe, an ideological fringe, a small group. Now there are, and we go back and forth where there are black folks are socially conservative but politically liberal and stuff like that. That is very reductive. That's a very reductive way of putting it. Because we aren't necessarily a monolith, but at the same time, that isn't necessarily the cleanest answer for that either. Sometimes black folks are conservative about some things and liberal on other things. But the grifter content creators, they are living in a persona. And a lot of times they found that a profitable space to be is being the black person that says the thing that the white people wish black people would say. They found a lane being the professional black friend, the agreeable Negro, if you will. And that is the space that they occupy. And they allow their content to be used against other black people. And more times than not, like the Hodge twins are idiots. Like their political stances are vacuous. They don't really have any strong things outside of like memes or anything. And anytime they actually face somebody that has some kind of research or some kind of knowledge that they don't have, they kind of wither, and then they go back to the tropes of just saying, you think, just the typical black conservative tropes, like, you're going to question my blackness and all that other stuff. But the larger point is they don't represent a substantial ideological component of black political thought. But if you look on the internet, you would think that black conservatives are ubiquitous within our community, and so they're really not. When you have your hardline black conservatives, they're still around at the family gatherings and everything, and we let them talk, and sometimes it'll turn into an argument, but they're not necessarily taken too seriously. The thing is, they found a way to monetize that being on the outside. And so there's an audience of white folks that look for that kind of content. And to me, that says more about you than anything else. If you're looking to find the agreeable black person that says exactly what you want these black people to say, and they talk bad about black people, like if you're a white fan of Jason Whitlock, there's something wrong with you. That says something about you as a human being. It says something about you if you agree on Jason Whitlock's reductive takes about black people. And he's found that it's profitable being that way. I remember when he was writing just like a beat writer in Kansas City. And he found that if he said something controversial or stupid, he would get a huge response, and people would be talking about the stuff that he wrote for a lot longer. So he just built a lane out of it. He built an entire lane around it. But the entire Jason Whitlock black conservative thing is a shell game. It's a show. And sometimes people end up internalizing it. Like they end up internalizing it and living the gimmick. But more times than not, it's a persona that they can get views off of. They get views from black people who don't like them. They get views from white people that agree with them. They get views from white people that don't like them. And so it's very profitable to have that kind of space where you can just create vitriol just by spewing anti-blackness and stuff like that. Okay. But the grift is they make content for white audiences. Whitlock ain't making content for black people. Like, that's not who his audience is. Candace Owens the same way. For a long time, she wasn't making content for black people. Armstrong Williams, even though he's on a black network or a radio network for a while, he wasn't making content for black folks. He wasn't. I look at the propaganda that they hit us with every black person, every brother my age. If you are in a specific cohort, we've all been through the Ben Carson, like where we were supposed to idolize Ben Carson until we realized Ben Carson hated our black asses. But we all went through that Ben Carson kind of where you need to idolize him, and then you find out what his political leanings are, and you're like, nah, I'm good. But a lot of these black conservatives, their audience is built of white folks. It's not a black audience. Sage Steele is a perfect example. Her audience ain't black folks. We can't stand her ass. And it's not because we can't stand her because of, being biracial or anything. We can't stand her because there's lots of biracial people that are down for the cause. We can't stand her because of the shit that she says and how condescending and negatively she talks about black folks. But we'll let them white folks pet her hair, like pet her. I've seen it. It's crazy work. But they occupy it's a validation. They're validation accessories, and they're the agreeable black friend. That's what their position is. That's what their station is. They say something inflammatory about black folks. Conservatives share it, and they get rewarded. And then they get rewarded with views and ad dollars, and then they escalate and say more inflammatory shit. And it's a circle of life. And invariably, whenever a white conservative wants to shut down a black person, that's the first line they go to. They find some black conservative saying the same things that they believe, and now it's coming out with black force. So instantly, since I don't know, since we're all supposed to think and breathe alike and act alike, I'm just supposed to believe this person because they're black like me. That's how it goes. It's Thomas Sowell for a new age. Because Thomas Sowell does that. That's what Thomas Sowell exists to do. He exists to shut down black people. But his audience ain't for black people. Black people, there's some black people that mess with them, but we don't really, they're not the majority. And a lot of people frame it like, well, more black people listen to Thomas Sowell. No, we're not going to do that, because Thomas Sowell ain't been in the community with black folks for almost 70 years. So he has no concept of what he's talking about. Okay. We don't take them seriously because they're not in our spaces. They don't interact with us. They don't speak for us. And they build brands off of showing that they're not like us. Insert the beat drop there. No, and so my frustration with it is an FD signifier mentioned this, but I had said this to somebody else before. I feel like there's a distortion that happens where they're elevating this fringe movement of black conservatives that have big platforms. They're trying to drag them into the mainstream and pretend like they have these massive followings of other black people. Really, it's just not. It really is not. It really isn't. There's a Key and Peele sketch about it too. It's really not. Like they aren't representative of any necessary group of black folks. And if you want to know a send up of that black person that is going out of their way not to be associated with black people, watch Bamboozled and listen to how Damon Wayans talks and how he acts. He doesn't necessarily want to be around black people, even though that's typically who he's surrounded with. And they don't necessarily take him seriously as a person either. Okay. But it's a trope. And so whenever you see this black conservative on there, don't assume that they represent an ideological, and I wouldn't say, don't think that any black person that you encounter represents the ideological mainstream of every black person you're ever going to encounter, because that's not the truth. But understand that black conservatives represent a small but disproportionately showcased side of black political thought. So I'll talk about that more on another episode. I don't want to give my more energy to these people. Let's talk comic books, y'all. Let's get into comic books. I've talked about depressing stuff and unfun stuff. Let's get into comic books. So this week, I've already read and listened to the summary of the latest Absolute Batman with the final battle against Absolute Bane. I think it's called Abomination. That arc is concluded this week. I am not going to do a review on that until next week, because I actually want to sit down and read the book. And I think I might be early, so I may be spoiling it for people. So I'm going to hold off on speaking to that. But it was incredible. It was incredible. The final battle between Absolute Batman and Absolute Bane was incredible. And we got a little bit more of what the Joker was about and what kind of person he was. But I really had a good time with that book. Like I said, I'm going to probably have more of a review for it next week, just so that I don't spoil it for people that haven't had opportunity to check it out yet. And so, like I said, I'm waiting for the digital release. I think I'm going to check and make sure. I think probably comes out tomorrow. But yeah, it was dope. I really like the Absolute line. I feel like it's a good entry point for a lot of people into the DC universe. I'm really concerned what's going to happen to the Absolute line as we wrap up DCKO. I want it to continue to exist as kind of a, the Ultimate Marvel Universe did, where it existed as a separate branch of a separate imprint or a separate branch of the DC universe. I don't want the universes to merge or get obliterated or destroyed. I want them to continue to exist, because I think the Absolute universe is just interesting enough to keep me around in terms of the way that they're doing world building. Like with Green Lantern, the world building is incredible. The lore behind the rings is absolutely, it's a breath of fresh air. Instead of just adding new colors, we're actually having new mythology that goes along with the colors. It's really interesting. Absolute Wonder Woman, a different frame of reference. Absolute Batman, of course. Absolute Superman. These books are really good. Absolute Martian Manhunter was one of my sleeper picks. It was dope. And it's really, you would put down the issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter and not know what the hell went on, but you were still invested in it. That's a real skill to have. Absolute Flash. I'm trying with Absolute Flash, if I'm being honest with y'all. But I know DCKO is going to have us have the mainstream versions of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman face off against the Absolute versions. We'll see what happens. I think Batman is off the board in DCKO. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see what happens with that. Like I said, I think the Absolute universe of DC is really a good jumping on point. Scott Snyder's working magic over there on Absolute Batman. And Nick Dragona's art is is shocking. But it's the ultra-violent Batman that, but it's not it's ultra-violent and it's grim, but it's not hopeless. And I think maybe that's the difference. It doesn't feel bleak. What was that one comic book? Was it Irredeemable, where it just felt bleak and dark? Yeah, it's not that. Okay. So I'll return next week with Absolute Batman, a rundown of that. Absolute Superman, last one I read was the Battle for Metropolis. That was incredible. Not Battle for Metropolis, Battle for Smallville. That was incredible. Added some new wrinkles to Superman, where he's sitting there looking at this human being that ruined one of the plans, and he's sitting there, he's struggling with I should tear this person's arm off, and he fights against that. And so it's really interesting take on the Superman mythology. I would strongly recommend that as a jumping on point. Okay. DCKO, that is the current event that is dominating DC Comics. And I gotta be honest with you. I love the Absolute Universe. I am not sold on DCKO quite yet. even after the most recent issue. And I think part of it has to do with the bias that I have towards I do not like comic books. I'm not a huge fan of, like, in the Marvel universe, where they did Punisher kills the Marvel universe or Deadpool kills the Marvel universe. Um, I'm not a huge fan of those. I would be more of a fan if they took a character that you wouldn't think would kill the Marvel universe and have them kill the Marvel universe, like Spider-Man kills the Marvel universe. I don't even know if that's a thing yet, but and I could be telling tales out of school. We'll see. But I think I'm not interested in those stories where it's superheroes just absolutely eviscerating each other. And DCKO is kind of like that. Now it's more like the way they reframe it. The way, if you've read the first issue, it's more almost like a video game where if you die in DCKO in the tournament, you just kind of respawn outside, and so you're not dead. You just respawn outside. But I don't like seeing heroes or villains specifically, but I don't want to see people get maimed in um all that other stuff, like mainstream heroes. Like, I'm not interested in that unless there's a story behind it. Like Absolute Batman, there was a story where you felt some kind of connection and it advanced the story a little bit. Sometimes I feel like it goes for a shock and awe thing, but I'm not a fan of kill everyone for shock value kind of storytelling. If you're going to have the violence, make it have a reason. Okay. I think the respawn mechanic actually makes sense, but I do feel like it almost removes the stakes. I think you almost have to kind of shut your brain off a little bit to get with the DCKO event. I'm not calling it yet. I'm not saying that it's good or bad right now. I'm just kind of, the last issue kind of left me. There's a specific thing with Lex Luthor where I've been following Superman books recently, and it's a real shift in his character that is not really explained. Like a complete 180 of the character he was leading up to the event, and they never really quite explained it. And I don't like that was a strong disconnect for me. Okay. But watching superheroes kill superheroes to win this thing. And then we're about to get into the brackets where it's one hero versus another hero, and it's a fight to the death, but they die and then they respawn on the outside. I don't know. I'm not calling it yet. I'm gonna continue to work. I'm gonna continue to try with it and see what they're able to do with it. I think it's Snyder that's working on the DCKO event, if I'm not mistaken. And so Scott Snyder typically hasn't let me down. Yep, Snyder's working on it. Scott Snyder typically hasn't let me down on it, but I haven't fully warmed up to this event quite yet. And going into the something kills the entire Marvel universe, I stopped reading Predator versus Predator kills the Marvel universe, and there's a very specific reason why. I feel like they made everybody dumb. I feel like they made every character an idiot, and I feel like they made them weaker just to accommodate, to make the Predator look good. I don't like the fact that instead of making the Predator step their game up to take down superheroes, what we get is this, where, okay, Craven, they're using Craven. He's the Earth's ultimate hunter or whatnot. I get it. But come on, man. Craven coming up with a plan to take down the Hulk. Are you playing? Stop playing with me, bro. And so you got to nerf the characters to a degree where it just makes it hard to read. And so I just stopped reading it. Like, I probably pick it up when I can kind of binge through a couple of books. But right now I'm not feeling it. And so instead of continuing to punish myself with Predator kills the Marvel universe, I just stopped. And I'll be honest with you, I checked out when they killed the Hulk. I was kind of off of that, because you're telling me that the leader, one of the smartest supervillains in the Marvel universe, spent all this time trying to learn how to defeat the Hulk. All these villains have spent all this inordinate amount of time trying to defeat the Hulk permanently. But all it takes is Craven, the Hunter, and some Predator. Come on, man. Come on, bro. I just feel like they nerfed the characters too much to the point where they're unrecognizable. And they're too stupid. Like, it's just everybody's incompetent and stupid and weak, and I just don't like it. The Predator is just egregious. The way that they got it is just egregious. And I know that they did Predator X with adamantium skeleton and all other stuff. It's going to take a while before I get back into that. And so I will have a review on Predator Kills the Marvel Universe someday, but it ain't going to be today. I just had to stop. I couldn't take it anymore. And plus, I'm already dealing with the Elseworld of DCKO where they're killing off the superheroes, but they're not really killing off superheroes. And then Age of Revelation where they're killing off the superheroes. And it's just enough. It's enough. One World Under Doom finale. I was intrigued by the cliffhanger. The Last Will and Testament of Victor Von Doom was dope. Making Reed Richards the executor on it was dope. I want to see where they go with it. He planned this to absolutely put the screws to Reed one last time. I don't necessarily think Doom is dead. From what I understand, he's doing something with the Living Tribunal. They haven't really laid that out clear yet, but I'm intrigued to see what happens with Dr. Doom. He's interesting again. Dr. Doom's always been one of my favorite characters, but I feel like, every time they make him the universal world-ending threat, it ends up where he ends up beating himself. And I think at some point you have to make it so that one of the heroes actually beats him. I don't know. And maybe that's the hero that you end up elevating at some point in time. But I do enjoy Dr. Doom getting the spotlight. I do think that he is one of the ones that really gets slept on when it comes to team busting villains in Marvel. Instead of creating new team busting villains and feeding Ben Grimm to them like they like to do, establish Doom as the real threat that he is. The evil version of Reed Richards who has magic abilities. That's what you're seeing also in the Ultimates. Or not the Ultimates, the Ultimate Marvel universe, where it is literally an evil version of Reed Richards who is the big bad of that universe. And it's interesting, because he's using his intelligence to instead of his powers. And in Ultimate Universe, Ultimate Universe, Reed Richards' powers are tied to his intelligence and vice versa. His intelligence tied to his powers. But I do like that version of Reed Richards. I think Dr. Doom has been interesting. I liked One World Under Doom. I do think it drug in the middle a little bit. I feel like they could have cut one issue out. Because it's fun to see, but there's only a certain amount of issues where we can just sit there and watch Doom dunk on the superheroes. And I think they went one issue too long with it. But otherwise, it was decent. I liked it. And Doom absolutely planned that disrespect posthumously for Reed, and I'm here for it. Age of Revelations, it's growing on me. It actually is. I know I've been on the fence about it. There's a couple of titles, like the Wolverine title, where it's a Wendigo instead of Wolverine. I'm kind of digging. Other comic book folks have mentioned this. The X virus in Age of Revelations is really, really, really weird. It's almost like the on the nose virus. Because the powers it gives you are way too on the nose. Like when the X virus ran through, it killed humans, but then it completely healed Nightcrawler and just made him normal. It took Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, and made her into a human cat. Is this how this virus works? It just is, the virus has a sense of humor. It's the sarcastic virus. It's just the virus has a sense of humor, just gives you powers, the wink and the nod, tongue in cheek virus. I don't know. But that part, that mechanism storytelling aside, I am enjoying it. The entire aspect of the choristers and Legion with the choristers or whatnot, and they allow him to basically enhance his abilities to overcome like a Wolverine or something. Like he needs the choristers in order to dominate. And for those that don't know, Age of Revelations is basically it's kind of like a new version of Age of Apocalypse, except Doug Ramsey, Cypher, is the main villain, and his power now is upgraded to the point where it used to be he had the power of language, where he could interpret any language and translate and communicate in any language. Now it's his words have the ability to force people to do things. And he has some very innovative ways of doing it. Like he can remove the language from somebody and absolutely scramble their brain. In the last issue, he removed as a punishment. Spoiler alert. If you haven't read the last issue, this is spoiler alert for the Age of Revelation book. So if you don't want to be spoiled on it, this was as of last week. But one of the things that let me shut my YouTube off. One of the things that Revelation did, Doug Ramsey. When I say Revelation, think Cypher, think Doug Ramsey. One of the things Revelation did, he removed Fabian Cortez's ambition. And if you know the character of Fabian Cortez, that is a big fucking deal. Like that's a major component of his personality. That's a core aspect of who he is as a person, is his ambitious nature. And he removed it from him. So those are the kind of powers that we can deal with. He can absolutely Revelation can absolutely instruct you to harm yourself. He can pull away your ability to communicate or understand language. He made Kitty Pryde. He basically made Kitty Pryde a ghost, activated her powers so that she couldn't shut them off. So these are the kind of powers that he's operating off of. So they really buffed him. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the battle that they're setting up between him and Apocalypse. I think that's going to be really interesting. What I don't want to happen is where it turned into because I liked Sins of Sinister when it first started. I really enjoyed Sins of Sinister when it first started. And then it got long and it wouldn't stop. Because it was like we did 10 years in the future, then 100 years, and then 1,000 years. And I feel like they could have stopped at 100 years. Like the 1,000 years, it really got super convoluted. And you're sitting there wondering, okay, so Sins of Sinister were 1,000 years in the future. How is Storm still alive? How are a lot of these X-Men still alive? How are the main characters in this book alive 1,000 years in the future, where none of them explicitly had immortality as one of their power sets? And I think what happened was Sins of Sinister, it was a good story, but it just got way, 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 way too long. And in the process, it built up Mr. Sinister into this. Like he's always been the team busting villain. Like I don't want to diminish what Mr. Sinister's reputation has been in Marvel comic books. He's always been that guy, but it elevated him to a level that I didn't quite feel like it was earned. But it was what it was. I feel like it got overlong. The series got way, way overlong. And and it introduced characters that they didn't really intend to have them stick around. Characters you'll never see again. Like, what was it? It wasn't the Spirit of Vengeance. It was the Spirit of Redemption or something like that, where it took over Banshee and like the female Sinister and all the different, like it just became, it ended up becoming this thing that just, it overstayed its welcome. And I really hope that Age of Revelations does not do that. I hope that, I would almost say it's almost beneficial to kind of abridge some aspects of the story if it starts turning into this long, drawn out thing, because it's already starting to feel like it's still good, but you're just waiting for it to not be good anymore. Like you're like, all right, I get it, y'all. Let's dial it back. I am not looking forward to it jumping 1,000 years in the future. I really don't, because that's where Sins of Sinister lost me as a reader, because I'm like, oh, here we go, 1,000 years in the future, and it's Emma Frost and Storm battling in outer space on starships, and none of it made any sense. It was just doing shit, and I got tired of it, and I checked out. So I'm really cautious. It looks promising, but I'm cautious. The world building in it is really good. There's some strong character threads, but I just don't want it to do what Sins of Sinister did, where it just stuck around too damn long. And by the end of it, you're begging to get back to the X books, because that's what happened. I was begging to get back to the mainline X-Men books so we could wrap up the stuff with Krakoa. And I almost feel like Sins of Sinister ran so long is one of the reasons why the Krakoan age felt rushed. And it felt like they were just sprinting towards a conclusion at the end, because it felt like they let Sins of Sinister run a little bit too long. Okay. So I want them to tell the story. I want them to make it a good arc, but I just don't want it to overstay its welcome. And so don't overcook this thing. Like, leave it on for as long as it needs to be. And then once the story starts winding down, let's go ahead and move on from it, and let's get back to the main X-Men books. And maybe y'all could do something with the From the Ashes era, because it's been trash by and large. Gail Simone's been doing good stuff. They ended Evel Ewing's book a little bit too early, but overall, it's From the Ashes has not been a banner moment for X-Men books. It's unfocused, it's all over the place, and it's not too terribly interesting. Okay. So that's what we got for this week's comic books. Hopefully next week I will have I'll be able to do my review of Absolute Batman and really dive into it. So that's what a lot of the show is going to be. Um, I'm interested. I'm interested to see what is next in terms of Absolute Batman. Like I said, I'm not trying to spoil it, but I think the next arc is supposed to be Joker. And when we finally get a chance to see Absolute Joker. And if you've seen Absolute Joker, or not, yeah, if you've seen Absolute Joker, he's terrifying. He is absolutely horrific. I'm interested. So that's it for comics this week. The Batman reviews coming soon. DCKO is still, we'll see where it goes. I'm pausing my review of Predator Kills the Marvel Universe. Doom is doing Doom things, and Age of Revelation is winning me over, but I'm having cautious optimism. Okay, so if you've stuck with me this long, dude, I love you guys. I really do appreciate you sitting there and listening to me prattle on and on about comic books. But I need to go up and grab something to eat, so that's what I'm gonna do. So I will see y'all next week. Have a happy whatever you celebrate. Spend some time with people you care about, enjoy and get some food, and just kick back and relax if you can. This world is designed to strip our joy. The clown show that we have in office seems to be doing Captain Planet level, eco villain level super villainy for no apparent reason. And so it's easy to get sucked into that circle of madness. What I'll ask for you guys is, take the time that's provided to you, enjoy some time with some people you care about, and do some things you like this week. That's all I got. I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. I might be back tomorrow to recap this on TikTok. I've been saying it, I've been teasing it, but I just got to sit down and turn on the camera. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.